All right, we might get started and people can roll in. Well, thank you for coming. And, this session, we'll aim for about 60 minutes. And in a moment, I'll introduce these three guys. But the session isn't no one up here feels that they know everything. I've got it all together. But hopefully just to generate some thought, and maybe you get one or two ideas or thoughts that you can take away with you. And I'm sure, certainly if you have a business or you're in an area of influence that you've got something going on in your world that you probably need one or two or three or four or five answers to. And hopefully within this conversation, something might click in your heart and in your mind that will help you move forward. And there's obviously those sitting where you are who probably may even know more about business, but it's just to generate a really good conversation and to begin some thinking about what it might be to look after or steer a kingdom business and to really steward well our influence as followers of Christ and what that means in a modern world. So I just want to, set the platform. And hopefully there'll be plenty of notes for you to take, to some take-home value. But I just hope that'll be fine because, there we go. I was going to say none of us are techies, but you're all right. Oh, okay. I just want to set the tone. I think particularly in the business realm, sometimes church life and church ministry there's a big focus on the platform, preaching, music, creative, and all that sort of thing. And I sort of liken it a little bit to. You want to go up to someone who knows what they're. Thank you. Well, I sort of liken it a little bit to a sport in the sense that I love basketball. And, there's probably different sports that we all like. But it's interesting, particularly in a TV world, is that often we'll see a goal being scored or a try being scored, and that's what we see. But we don't actually see what's happening off the ball. And, we see what the cameras mostly follow on the ball action. And I think, certainly from a business perspective, that a lot of the ministry point of it is, the ministry perspective is off the ball. You don't see it, you don't, there's no podcast, there's very few books, there's all that sort of thing. But it's just as important in the body of Christ, even though it may not have the same prominence or level of, people watching it. But I just think from a kingdom point of view, it very much is, it's an off-the-ball thing. In basketball, you see people score, but often it's what happens off the ball that creates that opening for them to score. Yeah. And I think often in the business world, and there's two people just to, again, set the tone. Two people I want to just refer to just for a few moments is Priscilla and Aquila in Acts. And I would call them off-the-ball leaders. And it says this, after this, in Acts chapter 8, and after this, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. Then he met a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome. Paul went to see them, and because he was a tent maker, or in the business of making tents, making stuff, producing goods and services, as they were, he stayed and worked with them. Every Sabbath he reasoned in the synagogue, trying to persuade Jews and Greeks. When Silas and Timothy came from Macedonia, Paul devoted himself exclusively to preaching, testifying to the Jews that Jesus was the Christ. So I think I'm going to ask these guys a few questions in a moment or two, but it was that Priscilla and Aquila found themselves, through no fault of their own, in business, maybe in a region and in an area that they didn't want to be. It says that they had recently come from Italy because Claudius had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome. Have we got someone coming for that? Thanks, Pauline. So they'd found themselves in a new business venture. They'd found themselves in a new region because someone else had shoved them out of where they were living. And sometimes in business, and certainly in influence, you can find yourself on a spot, not necessarily because you've thought it out and planned it and come up with a big business strategy. Sometimes there are external factors outside of yourself that have forced you into that position and making those decisions. So it's really interesting as far as off-the-ball players or off-the-ball leaders with Priscilla and Aquila. Can you just hold that? Thanks, mate. It then goes on to say that Paul, in verse 18, Paul stayed on in Corinth for some time, and then he left the brothers and sailed for Syria, accompanied by Priscilla and Aquila, and they arrived at Ephesus. So they've gone from Italy to Corinth to Ephesus, and then we read a little bit later that they end up in Rome. And I'm sort of guessing they're still tent makers, but all along the way you don't really hear much about Aquila and Priscilla because, you know, in the analogy of off the ball, they're sort of off the ball players, but they're helping the gospel proceed throughout Asia Minor, and thanks mate, and they're helping the gospel move forward in that way. And sometimes I think in the business world, and certainly, you know, outside of the platform dynamic, you know, that it has such incredible influence and weight. And Priscilla and Aquila go from Italy, go to, thanks. Thanks mate.
No, come on.
Hello. It's about to turn you on.
Celebration is not God writing something, nor is it God dictating. Like God in heaven going. And Moses going.
There we go.
1, 2, that's better. Thanks, mate. Can we thank Travis? So they're really influential in a off-the-ball way in helping the gospel spread in Asia Minor. And I just want to encourage all of us here that, you know, wherever you find yourself, that certainly in the area of influence and business, you know, if we could just push the whole idea of, you know, I'm only of value if I'm on the platform or whatever, you know, it's not even true. You know, often, you know, particularly in the business world, there's an ability to be more generous because you might have more flow, whatever it might be. That's as important as any other role in the kingdom of God. And wherever you find yourself, just serve well. So can you say amen to that? Amen. All right, cool. All right, well, I might introduce these guys. You're Jamie, Gino, and Matt. And I've asked them all to, I've got some questions, and maybe if we have time after, if you've got questions. And they probably offer a different perspective. But what we might do is, if you guys can, I guess, in 1 minute, give us a bit of an insight into your world, what you do, what you don't do. I've got Jamie here. He's recently started a business. Gino's been in business and corporate world for some time. And Matt works with a lot of guys in a business coaching capacity. So that's where sort of the different perspectives come in. And yeah, so Matt, Jamie, we might start with you. 1 minute.
1 minute. All right, yeah, so I'm Jamie. Quick minute about myself. Married, got 2 kids. I've just recently started a new business, a bit over 12 months old. It's a car detailing business, and also I do paintless dent removal, which is part of that. Prior to that, I've been self-employed for, I think, the last 10 years in sort of different businesses and tried different things and travelled around doing that. But yeah, God sort of led me to start this business, and yeah, 12 months on and it's all going good. So.
Yeah, my name's Gino. I've been in Dubbo about 2 years now. Came from Brisbane. I've been involved most of my life in the business world in more of a corporate operations, and working globally as well. And 2 years ago, my business partner approached me about a company here in Dubbo that was going bankrupt, and he wanted to buy the business basically. And so after about 45 minutes telling me about this company, I said, good luck, you have fun with that one. He said, no, I'm not going to do it unless you're in it with me. So long story short, I finished up having a look and bought a business we did, which I run, and he sits at home in Wollongong or Kiama. There's something wrong with that one. But a business that I totally had no idea about. I came from the heavy construction, steel industry, mining, building large 1,000-tonne structures to making eyewear. And we are Australia's, we bought a business here, it's in town, Clive and Wally, we changed the name to. So we manufacture eyewear here. And it's the last remaining eyewear manufacturer in Australia. They're all closed, the doors gone by the wayside, as a lot of Australian manufacturing is. And I had no idea how to make a pair of glasses, zero, 2 years ago. So that's where when we left Brisbane to step out left all the family behind, got 8 children, not 8 children, 8 grandchildren, 3 children back home, so, which has been the most difficult part, but we're trying to live the dream.
Looks like you are. My name's Matt. My wife Linda's sitting just over there. Hello, Linda. Give away. She's not getting away with people. Been in WA 5 years, 4 kids, married several, 24 years. I work cross-section between ministry, pastoring, building and carpentry, and life coaching and transitional coaching. So, and love GC Church. So part of here to put into you guys today.
All right, so I've got some questions, and again, a little bit later, if you've got some questions, write them down, and then hopefully we'll have time. We should have time to do that as well. So we'll start off with you, Jamie. Can you tell us what inspired or drove you to enter the world of business?
Well, probably drove me would be the answer. I sort of got thrown in it, I guess. About 15 years ago, I was just working for a place and I got made redundant as such. They just said there was no work left, so they sacked me. And I had no work at the time. I was in a little country town, St George in Queensland. I found out that there was a tender open at the council to put a fence around an airport. And so I just went, oh, well, that can't be too hard. So I threw together some quotes and got some sort of pricing, and I just put this tender in. I didn't even have a business or nothing. I just went as Jamie Carter. I just threw this tender into the local council and said, put my price in. I come in heaps cheaper than anyone else, which now I know why. Yeah. But I remember he was like the good head guy in the council. He come up to me and he said, you're Jamie. And he started asking me a few questions. He said, do you have a business or an ABN or anything? And I went, no, like what? And he goes, go and get yourself an ABN and set up a business name. He said, and then we'll approve you and you can do this. So it ended up happening. So I just got thrown in the deep end, went and found a mate to work for me, and we went out to some little town and fenced an aerodrome. And from that little situation that I just got thrown into just by going, yeah, why not? From then I've had a fair few businesses along the way and sort of travelled around. But yeah, that was what inspired me to sort of start my own business and be self-employed. And from there to where I am now is, sort of how it all happened.
I started off actually in the construction industry, where being the son of an Italian, they're all in the construction industry, mainly concreters, as they are. And my dad came out after the war to start a new life out here. And so I grew up, Dad was an extremely hard worker, and that's all he ever did. And at the age of 6 years, when I turned about 6, he said, okay, it's time to go to work. And I thought, what? So Saturdays and Saturdays, I was off to work with Dad on the sites, and working hard. So, and getting maybe a packet of potato chips on the way home, while he's topping out a beer at the pub. So I grew up, then I stayed in the industry. After I left school, I did an apprenticeship, became a carpenter. And then I did 2 years of my apprenticeship with Dad. That wasn't real successful. So I went then to do the rest of my apprenticeship with one of his friends, so we got on better that way. So, but after that, I got into business by myself, or with a friend of mine, just subcontracting. That was the first step into our own business. And then we're doing some work for this builder and went broke, left us with a lot of money, and we had a lot of money to owe and taxes and all that. So I was going to be married soon, so I stepped out of that and went to work in a corporate business. I thought this is a bit safer, just for the time being. And then I would get back into the construction. Well, I finished up working just in an office at a corporate business in the steel industry. And I stayed there, and then I sort of getting promoted quite well through the business. And then And then my current business partner, he was involved with the company growing, and he asked me at a conference to come and join their company, which I did. So I've been in that steel construction and they did a lot of work in the mining as well, and mainly in galvanising business. And the company grew. John grew the business. It was a family business, sold to the Brits, gave us funding, and we grew the business from a $20 million to a $500 million worldwide. So, and I was always thrust into different roles as we went along. And the company was amazingly successful. I always got thrown into a role, but where it was to try and, where things were going bad, I don't know why, I didn't get thrown in to fix it up, you know. And, and then they sent me to the United States to start the business over in the United States and build a big operation, a big plant there, which was extremely daunting. Never done that before. So I stayed within that all the way through, and then after 20 odd years, this company got headhunted by an Australian company to build boats actually. So, not pleasure boats, they build craft to go out to the oil rigs and all that. So they asked me to join because I was on the executive of the Mining Council. They wanted to get into something different. So they asked me to join to building big steel structures and supply into the mining and marine structures. So we did that, start this whole new division again. And then I was looking after Australia, then they spread me into Southeast Asia, and then they spread me into Africa, and then into the Middle East. And at this stage, things were getting pretty worn out, and my wife was never seeing me, and they were doing really well, and I wish that was my business, you know. Again, because I always wanted to get into my own business, but it was with corporate businesses, most of them got pretty well funding, you know, so, and I was being well rewarded. And then, as when I was saying before, and then John contacted me, and I think it was a God thing, because I was getting worn out really badly, never seeing my wife, or she'd be knocking on my office door at 10 o'clock at night, "You going to have some dinner?" "Oh, it's at that time." So I'm dealing with different time zones. So it was then that he contacted me, as well as a God thing, about coming to Dubbo to do this business, you know, and start having our own business. From there. So, but I've been involved with that corporate thing most of my life, you know, so, and then this time it's in partnership but with our own business. But all the business I did involved with, you run it like it's your own business anyway. Doesn't matter who you're working for, as your business. That's how you got to operate. You have to. That's the only way, you know, in that fact.
I think it's to go something like, we came, we saw, we concreted, isn't it? That's the Italian way, isn't it? Grass, no, concrete. You don't need a mower. No, just a broom, just a street broom. 14 years of age, my father's doing modifications on his house, and he's terrible. And at 14, I'm just going, I bet you I can do better than that. And isn't it funny how a gift comes out? If the gift's on the inside, the gift will come out. And so started to modify my father's house and then my father's property. And then at 16, failed school because schooling wasn't so good. And so got into, well, if I've got the gift, I can probably make some money out of it. And 25 years later, putting my hand to doing that with the carpentry was just a continual investment and growth of understanding how the building dynamic works, just, I guess, investing into and doing the learning curve, that the learning curve never stops. And so for pretty much most of our life, wherever God's taken us, it's been incredible having this gift set, which then became a tool set, being able to start up an enterprise of building or carpentry or maintenance wherever God called us. So I guess in a sense having the money maker to the ministry call, which was just a very, very handy thing to have. And, you know, straight up, if it's something that you've got, it's something that you need to talk through with someone, because some of you guys have really frustrated ideas that you haven't landed or grounded. The coaching side of things was interesting because it was always this, I guess, philosophy of everybody's got something inside of them. It just needs to be unlocked to come out. And so about 12, 13 years ago, I'd heard of this terminology of a life coach. And I'm like, a coach for life? Who needs one of those? It was back in the early days, but it was something that God just started to really speak to my heart about, where he was saying, hey, listen, son, not everybody's going to be in a church like you have. Some people need like a guide and someone to bring insight to help unlock and coach them and put accountability and disciplines and maybe pathways in place, maybe strategies with their goals to be able to walk out what's on the inside of them. They need help because most people don't back themselves. And so the coaching sort of started from, I guess, a frustration and in my own life where I go, well, how do I unlock what I've got? And so for the last 13 years, I've been doing particularly the life coaching, and has shifted since into a lot of startup coaching and transitional coaching. I did not realise how busy the transitions coaching would become, but who knows, in today's climate, people just are in a constant state of change. And people don't sort of often leave here and go to there. They're leaving here, going to there because they're going to there because it seems to be they're transitioning over there. So it's almost creating a nomadic lifestyle, but learning how to put structures and strength in place. Once again, something that's on the inside. So that's sort of my story.
All right, so we've got three guys here who come from very different perspectives, experiences, backgrounds. Not right or wrong, just different. And so I guess, Jamie, what are some of the key Kingdom values you're passionate about building into your business?
I had to actually think about this because I hadn't really even ever thought about it. And so the biggest thing that probably especially with this business that I've started now, and the reason why I've started this business that I've got now is probably just to give you a little bit more insight that I should have given you a little bit earlier, is I was travelling around chasing hailstorms, fixing hail damaged cars for the last 5 years or so. At the drop of a hat, I could get a phone call. I had to leave my church commitments. I had to leave family, leave everything just to go and chase these hailstorms. And I could be gone for up to 6 months, come back every now and then on a weekend, but that was about it. I knew it wasn't for me, so I was always wanting God to make the doors open for me to start this, to stop doing hail, right? Because it was not healthy for the family, wasn't healthy for me, but it was really, really good money, and it was just every year I just got a phone call, jumped on a plane and went. So, to a long story short, so I've been able to start this business up in Dubbo that keeps me here. I don't have to leave. My church commitments are good. I'm not just running off the minute it hails somewhere in Australia. So this has been the most struggling business that I've ever started. And so that's why this business is one that I've actually probably more relied on being a Kingdom business. And when I've sort of thought about it, I thought, oh, well, what do I do, or what values have I got to say that it is a Kingdom business other than just my faith? And the biggest thing was the amount that I had to rely on God to get me through it. Because what was happening, especially at the start of the business, was I was just sitting there. There was no work coming in. It was depressing. There was hailstorms everywhere in Australia. My mates were ringing me up saying, "We're making a ton of money. Where are you?" You know, and I'm just sitting there twiddling my thumbs, going, "I've started my business up. I'm sitting here." So the amount that I've had to rely on trusting God to get me through. So one of the values is the fact that you just trust God. You put all your worries and your cares and that to God, and just don't worry and stress about it. That's one of the points that I see in a Kingdom business. The other point is the unlocking the freedom to give, financially give, the financial freedoms it unlocks, as well as the mental freedoms that it unlocks. We've several times been sort of very short on money, and wondering when the next dollar's going to come in and how we're going to pay our staff and how we're going to pay the rent and that. But you'll continually, or we continually go, okay, God, we need X amount of dollars to come in, so we're going to give, trusting that that's going to come in, and that's been a really good thing that we've sort of based our business on in order to be able to survive, really. Because without it, I don't know. There's another question coming up where I'll probably answer this anymore, but I don't know how most people out there can do a small business like we do and bigger businesses would be the same, that you don't have God to trust in. Like, I just don't know how it works. So yeah, and the other thing with having a business, a kingdom business, is it's your pulpit. Like, I'm no good at getting up here talking like this, you know, so, cheers. I'm even worse when you stick me in up on stage like that. So it gives me, my business is like my pulpit. So I don't sit there and Bible bash and that everyone that comes through the door. I don't know if you've realised I've got that tattoo there, Jesus Freak. That's a really good conversation starter. So, you know, that sort of helps customers walk in and they're talking to me, and then they see the tattoo, and so straight away they just start talking. They also can see your attitude, you know, your positive attitude, your friendly attitude. The fact that you're not just there to take the dollar off them and take the money off them and then tip them out the door. You're actually there to care for them. You're there to create a relationship with them. There's a lot, you know, I'm not saying that non-kingdom businesses aren't like that, but it's just something that just comes hand in hand with being a kingdom business, is that you're, you know, all that sort of stuff just comes naturally, and people can see that. And then when they sort of see the way you're acting and then see that, and then in conversation they go, I know you're a Christian, I knew it, you know. And so that's the sort of, I guess, if that helps answer that question.
Well done, that's great. My tattoo's faith, hope and love. And people ask about that. Yes, with what have we tried to things we're passionate about and to bring into this business here, because I'm the only Christian in the business, in this company. My business partner is a non-believer, so that brings its own problems into place. And the business, when we bought it, there was a lot of issues caused it to go into the state that was in. So I had to bring some passion into the business as well. But what was really important once we got back going, you know, we didn't do a proper due diligence as we should have, or John didn't anyhow, because, you know, we bought the business, we've moved in, and next minute the guy wants to kick us out. You know, 12 months rent. What? He said, you've got to be kidding me. Where'd that come from? You know, he said, it was over 12 months. So I saw the owner. Is this right? Oh, I forgot about that. And, oh, that's fantastic. And then we paid it the year's rent up, John and I. And by the way, this whole business has been funded without a loan, you know, and it's been really tough going, I can tell you. And so we paid it up, and then he said, you've got 8 days to get out. I thought, what? And he said, I want you out of the place. I said, you're joking. So, and I said, well, you've got to give us notice. And he said, I have. Hello, Irene? So you got notice? Oh, I forgot about that. So we had 8 days to move a whole factory, you know, and find a place, which we don't know how we did it, but we did it, and it was God's help. And then just to move in cost another $40,000 to set everything up. So all these things started pretty tough for us. But as we're building the business up, and we started off with 3 or 4 people, we're now up to 10 and a half with the departure. The half, part-timer. You know, it was really important to build trust and integrity into the business, you know, and that was really important for us, you know, and everything we did has got to be ethical, no matter what. Sometimes in business people can get tempted not to be ethical, and that's just not even on the radar with us. It has to be ethical. We also, and the great thing too is I'm a huge man on customer service, you know, and great customer service. And I look at that customer service as serving others. And that's the way I look at it. Customer service is serving others, and that's what we've got to do. We're servants, and we've got to serve others, and that's serving our clients and the people that work for me as well, you know, and that's really important. And to bring that into the business as well, and in my own faith is to show and lead by example as well. You know, I need to bring those biblical standards into there. And again, as I said, I'm the only, there is another believer, sorry, the Filipino guy I hired, he's a very devout Catholic, And, you know, he's an amazing guy and he leads by example himself. He comes in always early. He comes in with a big smile on the face. He goes around to everyone first and he says, good morning, how are you? When he leaves in the afternoon, it's always a big smile. He just doesn't leave. He goes around to everyone and says goodbye, and he comes into me and he says thank you. Every day. You know, and that's the standard, you know, and that rubs off on the others too. Plus now I've had to hire, well, the last two I've hired, two ladies actually. One's a Muslim and one's a Sikh, you know, both from India, who amazing ladies actually, and new to the industry totally. So that even brings its own challenges. But again, having great discussions with them, and it looks like a huge chance I'm bringing them to church in November, you know, to our church. You know, because we sit there at lunchtime and share my faith, and they're sharing theirs as well, which is great to get an understanding. So I've invited them, and they're very seriously considering coming to church in November. So, but that's the main thing, is it's integrity of the business, and really being out there as an example to them and showing my faith, you know. As I said, my business partner being a non-Christian, non-believer, he's atheist, has its own challenges, but he totally respects my outlook and my faith.
It's awesome, man. You're like grandpappy, aren't you?
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like.
I guess I've probably underpinned everything I've done with 3 core values, and I worked this out early on in life. Is to add value. That's why he's the senior. To add value, to bring health, and to impart life. And I think whether it's your private world or your public world or your generating world, your business world, I think those 3 values are critical, because you sort of use those as the filters to be able to land of what you produce. But I think particularly from the business point of view, whether it's the building and construction or the coaching, I think there's probably 3 questions or 3 values I often look at. Is what I'm about to do investing into the other party? I think a lot of the time we can spend, and particularly if you have workers' mentality, you'll spend your hours to get your wage sort of deal. That just does not cut it in business. It's the lowest possible level to be able to give a service to get a return. Like, it's got to be a little bit more than that. I think so, that whole spirit of, you know, investing. And so often, even with clients, I'll just say, hey, we can just spend the money and make this, or we can invest into this that little bit more and lift that up to the next level. And 95% of the time, that's the value that they're wanting to contribute to. I think another one is, are we going to produce here? I think with a business, so often a business can get caught up in being a processor. And there's a massive difference between processing something and producing something. I just think that people want to see results, and particularly if there's been promises made or you've said you'll do something, so that's the whole integrity deal, that when you produce, that there's a return of effort. I think that's a huge one, because sometimes you might hire somebody, and I know in the building trade particularly, the amount of times I went in behind somebody else and they, oh look, I hired this guy or this tradesman, and you know, they promised all of this, they didn't do this, I've uppaid them, forward paid them, and it was like, well, we need to redeem this situation. So there's that sense of producing, and hopefully you're not rushing it too hard, that it's an actual quality job. But I think that, you know, particularly those couple of things there. And I think at the end of the day, probably more on the coaching side of things, that I guess the contribution spirit, to me it's massive on contribution. In any role we do, whether it's business or job or whatever else, we can give something. But I think it's sort of like the investment, but it's that you'll always contribute something greater than maybe what was asked. Is there a cherry on top? Is that little bit extra? Did you deposit something that you didn't promise? So that over-promise or that under-promise, no to deliver sort of, I guess, attitude. I think particularly if you have a business, and I found this a lot with the startups, with the startup businesses, that for the guys who do the extra 5 or 10%, they get incredible repeat business. For the guys who, for whatever reason, withhold that extra 5 or 10%, they start asking the question 6, 9, 12, 18 months in, I just can't seem to keep clients. And you sort of, I can tell you why. Because the 5%, it's the 5% question. So yeah, it's just a few of my thoughts.
All right, so probably just a bit of a different tack. in a sense, those who work for you represent you, or they represent your company. So, Gino, you said that you've now employed, so you and you've got a Filipino who's a devout Catholic. So outside of that, you've got people who are not in the Christian faith, doing the Christian walk. So for people who are representing you, and by inference representing Christ, as a kingdom business, what would be some non-negotiables for you, for staff, in relation to, say, kingdom values or behaviour that are for you are non-negotiable, so that irrespective of someone's faith or what have you, because there are elements there that as a business leader or leader of an organisation, and for you too, Jamie, what would be some things that, irrespective of someone's faith, background, experience, all those sorts of things, that are just non-negotiable, that whether they're a Christian or an atheist or somewhere in between, that it's not even about faith per se, but it's about, okay, these are just some values that personally you hold, that irrespective of someone's faith or philosophy, that you would say, okay, that's us. If you believe that, you're in, my business is the wrong business for you. What would be some of those?
Well, at the moment, I've got it pretty easy because there's me, my wife, and then I've got my brother and my nephew that work for me. So, and both my brother and nephew are, they're Christians as well. And they're sort of going through their own walk. So at the moment, it's really, really easy. I mean, we have Christian worship music playing sometimes during the day. So, but I have had staff that haven't been Christians. None that have been completely the opposite to the fact that we clash. But if I was to have that, I guess, where I've got to put down a rule or a law or something like that. I just think respect, and it would be the same for me to them. Respect for my beliefs, respect for my faith. It's my business, it's something that I've created. So I'd like for them, regardless of what their beliefs or anything is, if we don't have swearing in our workplace, we don't have swearing in the workplace. If we don't have, pictures of women in the toilet or bathroom, we don't do that. You don't showing silly stuff on your phone at lunchtime, sort of thing. And so it's more about sort of just respecting, I think, that they respect us and our faith, where we are. What's the word I'm looking for? Like, don't dishonour God or our faith or the Christianity or the way that we do things because of that. But yeah, I haven't had to deal with that at all. It's been really sort of easy in that sense for me.
I think when if you start a business from scratch, you can probably, because the biggest thing I find is culture in a business, and by coming into a new business or into an existing business, there's always a culture in there, and most times you need to change that. And that's the hardest thing to do, is changing culture. I took over a company once that was losing, again, parachute into one that was losing $900,000 a year, and by year 2 we're making $3.5 million. The most difficult thing I had was changing the culture in that company. It was really bad, and that was the first thing I had to do, change the culture, people's perspectives, and do another thing before we even decided to go out, change other things, and then go into the marketplace. So I changed the culture first, and that took quite a while to do. They were so ingrained in what they were previously, how they operated. And guys were saying, no, I'm going to move you over this area. I think you'd be great. No, I don't like it over there. Sorry, I'd really love you to go over there, as nice as I possibly could. But having to change that culture is really, really hard. In a brand new business, when you're starting yourself, you can bring the right culture in from day one. And that's right from day one, like as Jamie's got here. The business with ours, there was a culture in there that really wasn't great. And that's been one of the biggest hurdles to change that. But really important is that I had to change the respect for each other. that was really important because they were talking about other people and the previous owners, and it was a lot of that bitchiness going on. It was terrible. So that culture had to begin to change, and we want people, trying to change it to biblical values. I can't, ram things down their throat, but it's just again by being an example. We had a situation, one guy there, he said something inappropriate, jokingly, to one of the girls and thought it was fun from like how they talk in previous business. So she came to me a bit upset, and I called him into my office, closed the door and had a really great chat with him, told him, it's totally not acceptable in this company, and gave him my values. And his whole attitude changed about that, which is great. It's funny when you start this, the people that we had in the business before, I'm down to one left. How God's sort of changing that around, I appointed a lady as a production supervisor. She's never done that sort of work before, but she's got a bit of OCD, which is what you want with those sort of people. Very organised, so she drives me crazy sometimes, but I had to have that sort of person. The guy who thought he should have had it, he totally wouldn't be able to do it. Extremely intelligent. And he got really disappointed with that. And then I find out later he's a bit of a chauvinist as well. Women can't do this sort of stuff, Well, he's decided to leave now anyway and go into a different role somewhere. So I'm left with just one, and saying how God's changed all that and bringing the people in through the business now, that I can instill those values that I want in the business. But it is, I think the integrity, as we keep bringing that up a lot, is important, and the respect for each other. I think it's, to everyone in there. So they're the values the kingdom values that I'm bringing into the business. Yeah.
It's just quickly, I think, the culture of the organisation, the attitude of the workers in that organisation, and the values are all a filter. I remember it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was 4 conversations in 1 week with 4 different businesses, and those 3 areas all had captured weaknesses in the businesses with the staff, because those things are the filter. And each of the business owners had all gone, whether it was a cultural issue or a practice or a values attitude issue, that because they'd really reinforced those things, it caught the situation when it was a molehill, not a mountain. So I just think, when different, say from a transition where you've already got pre-established staff, just found particularly, those things are just critical. So, yeah.
All right, so maybe each one of you could give us just a quick headline snapshot of a really difficult time in business and how you saw God just bring you through it. Just give us one, Gino, not 41. Just kidding. Just one, and how you, and obviously there's some personal stuff in there that God just wants to bring you through, but how God just came through for you.
Well, I've got one that really sort of stands out for me, and that's with this current business that I've got now. And so like I was saying earlier, I was out chasing hail. I knew that it was best and that God wanted for me to sort of stop doing that for the reasons that I said, family and church and that. So I was always saying, all right, God, when you make it stop hailing in Australia, I'll stop chasing hail. Pretty selfish thing to do because there's a whole industry that relies on it. And so I kept chasing hail because of that. And it wasn't until it sort of clicked, I can't remember sort of how or when, but it clicked, and it was like God was like, no, you've got to take the first step and then I'll back you up. And so finally through a lot of sort of figuring out what to do, decided to start this new business up. Started up, we had good funding that we'd saved up to do it. I like to sort of do things like the best straight away, so we poured everything we had into making this place look great, the shop and everything look great. A little bit too far in the sense that I didn't really have too much to back me up for too long, but I was a bit, I guess, cocky and going, yeah, God will sort of provide, and which is a good way to be. And so it was a couple of months into having the business, and we'd had nothing, and it was dead. And I'd been doing everything I could to try to get work in the door. We'd poured all our money into advertising and marketing and that, and nothing was working. A lot of the business has to do with car yard stuff, so I'd go and knock on the doors of car yards and give them my card every single week, to the point that you could tell that they'd see me coming and try to go and make themselves busy. And doors just kept closing. I'd get a little bit off them, and then they'd just close the door, and it would just be a slap in the face. And I remember this one day, I was walking back from one of the car yards. I dropped the car off to them that they gave to me. It ended up just being a nightmare, and it was just horrible. Dropped it back, and I said, "Oh, do you have anything else?" And they went, "Oh, no, look, we're right. We just got to watch how we do this, so thank you, but no thanks." So I'm walking back to the workshop, and I got absolutely flogged by a magpie. He hit me a couple of times across the back of the head, and I got no insulation up there or nothing. So cracked my head open, I cracked my skin and everything open, and it was just horrible. It was like the walk of shame. Got back to the workshop, and I was just sitting there, and it had been day in, day out that we'd just sat there at the workshop with no work coming in. And I just was like, God, I'm done. We're out of money. We luckily hadn't had to borrow anything yet, but I was like, nah, we're out of money. I've tried everything. And I just went, I know that it's you that made this, like wanted this to come together, sort of thing. It was, we'd done businesses before that we hadn't sought God for, and they didn't work. And this one, we knew that it was exactly what God wanted us to do, where God wanted us to be. And I just went, I'm just going to now leave it up to you. And there was a scripture that I come across, and it was Psalms 55:22. Give your burdens to the Lord, and he will take care of you. He will not permit the godly to slip or fall. And so I just found that scripture, and I read it out to him, and I said, all right, you know that I've done. I'm not just sitting here going, where's the work, God? And so I just went, I'm just going to leave it up to you. And look, it didn't happen like that next sort of day, but within 1 or 2 days, work started coming through the door. It started building up. I started having to try to find staff to put them on, to put on to handle the work. And then, lo and behold, a hailstorm come to Dubbo, which we haven't. Dubbo hasn't had a hailstorm like that for like 15 years. And so the first year that I decided not to chase hail, and there was hail everywhere in Australia, it hailed in Dubbo. And so I'm still, and that's been 9 months now, and I'm still flat out fixing hail damage. The detailing side of things is flat stick. I've got 2 guys on that are just flat out doing that. And we're only 12 months old, and we're just absolutely flat out. And there's a lot more things that we do, obviously, in that. But yeah, that was one of the parts that really stand out for me, where we were really struggling and just had to just hand back. Like, I tried everything possible that I could do, and you can't make it hail. And so left it up to God, and God delivers, and it's like what the scripture says. So yeah.
Well done, Jamie. I have got 41 actually, Ben, but I'll give you one very, very brief one, very brief one. I changed the direction of the business because the way it was going and how it was set up and what we were producing, we're manufacturing and selling to optometrists. Right. We don't have the range that they want. We just don't have, so we're competing with distributors, and these distributors have 20 different brands and so many models of each one. We don't have that. And if we had to continue in that manner, we might as well have locked the doors in the place. So we then changed direction of the business. I thought, I've got to continue to do that. And we sell, by the way, I think there's 15 I counted wearing glasses in here too, by the way. So and we do a good deal at Clive and Wally down there. We sell direct to the locals, we do, public, we do. So I had to change the record. So, there's 8 million people wear glasses in this country, and probably 12 million should, because they're wearing those things they buy at the chemist, or they don't bother getting their eyes checked. So I had to change direction of the business, and it was just God talking to me about that. So that's where we started going to Australian designers that are getting their eyewear made overseas. One particular, and I had to go and sell to them how good we are, and and that to be convinced. They got a product that's brilliant out of France or whatever, not the Chinese rubbish, out of France, and you have to meet that. You know, we buy all our products come from Europe and from Italy, all the components. I don't buy any rubbish in their stuff. So it's as good as your Pradas, the same materials, all of that. So just that we don't have that written on the glasses. So I went to these designs, one particular one, thought he'd give us a go, and he designs really weird stuff. Let me tell you, you don't see his in the shopping centre optometry business, very boutiquey, got a massive following in America and in Europe. If you watch the Jimmy Fallon show, that Questlove guy, he's got about 20 pairs of Collins glasses. So I convinced him. So he gave us this order to manufacture these, and it was really pushed for time. We finished on a Tuesday night at 10 o'clock at night, and I was not happy with, we had to get out. They were for a show. He had a massive fashion show on the next day in Brisbane, and it's 10 o'clock at night here, finishing off, and everything was rushed, and they weren't great. And because I'm starting to panic now, this fashion show put on was going to showcase all his eyewear, and he was only showing these particular models, nothing else. So I'm freaking out pretty bad, you know, palpitating here. I'm talking to Carol, she's praying for me at home. So anyway, I said, nothing I can do about this. So I got on a plane the next morning. It's the only way I'm going to get him up to him. So I got to Brisbane, and I kept looking at him. I thought, this is terrible. This is one, I'm going to lose this guy immediately. And he's got this huge fashion show put on by one of the massive fashion houses. And I said, God, look, I've got to leave this one to you. I don't know. I'm putting it at your feet. That's all I can do now, you know, and Carol's home praying. So I left. I just felt at peace, I suppose, some way, and, you know, and when I just had to hand it over and trust. Well, a massive thunderstorm hit Brisbane. This guy could not fly out of, had floods and everything, this guy could not fly out of Melbourne. The show was cancelled and was put on in about 3 or 4 weeks later, which gave me the time to do them right. And now I've got about 2,000 to make for this guy, you know. So, and they are still weird stuff, let me tell you. There's a lot of hard work in here. It's very strange, very strange. But, you know, I just had I was panicking, but I just said, look, God, this is in your hands now. I'm done. It was huge. So, yeah, so that was a big God moment for me, I can tell you, and trust.
3 times in our journey, because we've gone to new towns and I guess started new ministry works, or we've had to start our business 3 times fresh. And who knows that when you go somewhere, particularly in the building industry, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And so what happened is Matthew 6:33. Is seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness and all these other things. And that became a mantra for many, many months each time, because what would happen is, in practicing that scripture, what it means is the legality of the kingdom of God is the domain in which the flow will come, not through who I know. It was either a kingdom business or it wasn't. And so because it was around the monetary issue, therefore it had to be in the monetary area that it was submitted to the kingdom. And so what I'd learnt so often, and we just did a blind practice, was that I need money, then I need to sow what I have to release what he has. And so each time in the challenge that we never, you know, it got really, really tight, or that there was just no work coming in, every time I just Matthew 6:33 on these funds, and sometimes it was down to $100. But it was, I'm going to sow a faith offering, not just any offering, it was a faith offering, because the seed of faith releases the faith of work. And it was relying as a kingdom business that he was the supplier of all my needs according to his riches and glory. We have for 23 years now have operated our business and our life on these principles, because it was, you need some money, I need to sow the money. Because the legality of the kingdom is what releases it, not just because I know somebody, not just because I'm really talented. And I think that was the understanding from the problematic point of view, that he is the provider of what we need. And through the hands of the tooling and the business, that is how we've done it each time. And it's been incredible every time. He never, ever, 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 ever has let us down yet.
All right, well, I've got a few more questions, but maybe there's 1 or 2 or 3 out there, because we are getting close to finishing up. So who'd love to put one of these guys on the spot and ask him an absolutely random question? Or have you got any other questions that are going on inside that you'd like them to, you do?
How do you protect your personal life and family life in the midst of all that's happening in business? I find that it's never, or not often, lack of talent, passion, innovation that takes someone out, but a breakdown of something that's going on in their personal life, whether it's family, marriage, lack of being able to keep things together in your personal. How do you protect that and look after that? And do you have any sort of guides around that?
Do you want to tackle that one, Gino?
That's a good question, Aaron, actually. That's a hard one. That's a tough one. It really is. And I think balance is the big thing, you know, and it is a balance, because sometimes my balance goes the wrong way, and it does. And I've got to try to protect that. I've done it before, time and time again, where I've just thrown myself into something, and I've got a bad habit of doing that. And I'm very fortunate. I've got an amazing wife that knows when to pull me back into gear, and she reminds me about that. And it is, and you know, and it is absolutely. And beware of a praying wife. But it really is important that your life balance is critical with your Christian life. It really is, because sometimes you get so hooked up and tired, and you get into all sort of stresses and everything, and you let that go, you know, and you try to take that all on yourself, which is bad, you know. It's not good at all. So it's getting that right balance with your Christian life and making sure you do that, and you know, making sure you're in the Word, because you can slacken off on that. And again, I've got a great wife that gives me a slap on the back of the head and brings me back into gear with that, and that's really pushed you. It can get out of control. There's no doubt about that. Very, very easily. But you really need to have even a mentor. I think mentors are great. I think a mentor is really, really, really important. Have a great mentor, and if you've got those issues, you can go to a mentor, a good Christian mentor, who can then help you and guide you through that. But it is very hard to get out of sometimes, you know. And especially with the business, things might be going a bit tough, you know, and you've got to be able to let certain things go, you know, but you've got to hand it over to God and trust, you know. But it's a balance. It's really important, that balance.
Any other questions? Thoughts? Yes. Do you want to yell or you want this? Thanks, Tim.
So you're just talking about kind of personal life and business life. How much do you see that possibly that could be an issue for Christians in business, seeing that, okay, they have this life that is business and they have this life that is home? Like, I guess, from my understanding of being a Christian, is that it is life, if that makes sense. And the other one was, can you think of any kind of stories or instances where you had a real connection with people about who you are? Because I know, like, you guys are kind of business owners and those kinds of things with those other people. Like, you talking about your lunchroom and just conversations, I guess, that people can say, okay, like, bring it all down level. Where did I share God through the experience of my business, maybe with clients or people I work with? So it's kind of two things.
Great, thanks, Tim.
I'd say Jamie nailed that a bit earlier with the platform. Business is your pulpit, business is your platform. I think that if it's one of those things where God, I've heard and I've practiced it myself, God, let today in what I do be a witness to you, and let your opportunities come in your kingdom. And almost without fail, every day that I pray that prayer, something moves in a conversation or a situation. And one of the guys could probably add to that. But I think the other thing is, it's actually a thing that this fella has drilled in us as a key team, from a leadership, because you're actually looking at someone who has an incredible understanding of this whole dynamic right here, even though he hasn't said anything, but margin. And at the end of the day, that margin and balance of understanding. If you're in business, you'll bleed business, you'll flow business. If God's given you a gift and an assignment, if you want to put it, to be a generator of income, you're going to talk about it. It's going to be part of that. The kids will be exposed to that. The kids will be exposed to the not so good days. It's like the weather. The kids get exposed to the weather of business in your household. I think the job of margin, which Ben so often talks about, that if you've got a good margin, now someone like and I know these guys, I don't know Gino so well, but he's a high doer. So his margin's about 5%. Should be 10%, but it's about 5%. So, but in that margin, it's that gap that is able to stop, fresh, stop, just chill, just switch off, God time, family time. You just, and just implementing margin. And Ben's drilled us on that because we're all high doers, man. We'll go 120% and won't stop for months at a time, and then we just lose our course. So
No, I agree totally there with Matt on that, because you can get caught up in that, and how do you separate? And you do take your private life into the business life, and vice versa. You really do. And you can't help it. Like,
So you still see, like, all of you kind of have spoken about my private life and my business life. I'm just wondering whether you see intertwining, like whether there's a perspective where that is kind of your life as opposed to separating it. I'm not quite sure I understand margin. That's right.
yeah, I'll hand it over to Matt in a second. But like, you're trying to separate that. I think you have to separate it sometimes. You've got to do it. Otherwise, and that's what I was saying for having that balance in life, is you've got to have that balance, and you've got to separate that at times. Otherwise, that'll take you over. But it's a balance. It really is.
Yeah, Ben can. That's all right.
Maybe the way I heard it talked about in one place was that, and this sort of balance, which we will end on today, but sometimes we see balance as equal parts, or even, you hear a lot about in church circles, God first, family second. All right, that's fine, but maybe if we looked at instead of in a linear way, maybe if we looked at everything like on a horizon. And so, like Gino was in his workshop or whatever at 10 o'clock on that night before he used to fly out to Brisbane. So if he did that every week, all right, and that to me would be where there is some crossover. Like, I don't know about you, but at 10 o'clock, I'm just thinking of going to bed. All right, but on that particular night, all right, he's all right. Why? Because he's got several things going on. All right. So for balance in that time, all right, for him was to go to 10 o'clock to make sure that eyewear was done. All right. And so obviously it meant that the other things that sit on the horizon, all right, doesn't mean his life's out of balance. No, but if it's always in that space, if it's always there, all right, that's problematic. And even if it was always just family life, all right, he's going to get a knock on the door someday from the bank saying, "Hey, mate, yeah, but I'm over here now. Yeah, but we need you to pay this." All right. So, but you can't help, particularly in business, you can't. Yeah, there is a lap over, unquestionably. But I just think sometimes we want to do things in a linear way like that. But I think if it's horizon. Well, this has got my focus for now. But these other things that are in my peripheral vision, I know they exist. I know I've got to, and the more you've got on, all right, you're either going to make a decision that this is going to get bigger, or that's going to get longer, all right, and and some part of that is creating margin. But that sometimes in margin, like we I know we've got to go. Sometimes from a ministry perspective, you know what? Sometimes it's even not the ministry that kills people; it's their calendar. And I would say in business, it's very similar. Like, it's your calendar. Like, if your calendar's out of control, all right, business has pressure and stress. But I'm telling you now, for a lot of people, it's their calendar. It's just wild. It's all right. They haven't put it in. Whatever your rhythm is, and it's different for everybody. All right, I think that can sometimes just put you way out of whack. Anyway, we've got to go, and don't forget 12:30 is your next session, or that elective, wherever that might be. Make sure you grab a coffee, tea, whatever it is, can of Coke. That'd be good. And thank you. Can we thank our guest speakers? Thanks, guys. Appreciate that.